Hey folks, I'm Mark Smith, host of the Four Boxes Diner, constitutional attorney, member of the U.S. Supreme Court Bar, best-selling author, and proud American gun owner. If you haven't subscribed to the Four Boxes Diner Second Amendment channel, please do so and show your love for the right to keep and bear arms. Okay folks, I'm going to make this quick. As I predicted, Congress is going after the gun companies and their marketing. So today, the New York Times, in my view, the handmaiden of Congress of the Democrats, we know this, not a shock, they published an article with the headline that reads, breaking news, leading makers of assault rifles collected over $1 billion in revenue in the past decade as U.S. mass shootings surged, a House panel found. Now, first of all, the Associated Press last week said that you're not supposed to, in the press, use phrases like assault weapons, assault rifles, because you should be using words like semi-automatic rifles. That is not me. That's the Associated Press. That is not part of the vast right-wing conspiracy, by the way. I view them as part of the establishment media. Yet they recognize that they should not be using propaganda terms for the anti-gunners, and they at least said, don't do it anymore. But of course, the New York Times couldn't help themselves this morning and immediately called, AR-15s and AK semi-automatic AK-47 style rifles to be, of course, assault weapons and assault rifles. Not true, all propaganda terms. But I want to make a few quick points about this. We're going to talk a lot about this in the future because I'm telling you, they're going to be going after the gun industry. First of all, we've heard today that Nancy Pelosi has polled or at least delayed a vote on the so-called assault weapon ban in the House. Now, I don't know whether that means that the bill's gone for the rest of the year and is done for this Congress. It's possible. Or whether or not they're going to just vote on it in September when they come back from the August recess. I don't think it matters because, as you know, as I've said before, this House bill, even if it passed the House, was not going to go anywhere in the Senate, and it certainly wasn't going to get enacted into law. And even if it were enacted into law, which it wasn't going to happen, would be struck down by the Supreme Court, in my view, pretty quickly. So none of this was going to make sense. But I think there's a good chance that what happened here was the anti-gunners wanted to trot out their arguments, and they wanted an excuse to bring these gun manufacturer executives, these gun company executives, which they brought to Congress to do discovery on them, to get information from them, to make them testify under oath, so that lawyers and the anti-gun movement across America could use the information uncovered by Nancy Pelosi's Congress in all their lawsuits against the gun industry that they're anticipating bringing or harassing the industry in their blue states like California and New York going forward. So I have a feeling that even if Congress wasn't intending to ever vote on this assault weapon bill, propaganda term, of course, I think they may still feel they accomplished what they wanted to do, which is to gather information that they can hand out to their friends who will sue or otherwise harass the gun industry across America going forward. The problem for Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats is they've just shown their hand again that they want to ban and confiscate firearms in America, those that are most commonly owned. And that, I think, ultimately will hurt them more than help them. Because at the end of the day, just a few points in this video, at the end of the day, remember, you and I need AR-15s and AK-47 style firearms to protect ourselves and for other reasons that are lawful. We like them, okay? But keep in mind that a major reason why the Protection and Commerce of Lawful Arms Act passed in 2005 to help protect the gun industry from frivolous and near frivolous lawsuits was because the military and law enforcement in America wanted to make sure that they had a robust American gun industry to buy their weapons from, because certainly even the Pentagon does not want to be forced to buy their firearms and guns from Chinese and Russian gun companies. They want a robust domestic American arms industry, not only so we can supply our government, not only so we can supply our law enforcement, but that we can supply our civilians that have a Second Amendment right to the materials. And of course, we as Americans, we can sell these firearms and whatnot to our allies overseas and make money. So there's at least 4 powerful reasons why we never want to lose the domestic gun industry. And there's a lot of people in the establishment that agree with us, maybe more quietly than we are, but they don't think that the American gun industry should be destroyed either. A few other quick points before I close. The New York Times article talked about how these handful of, these 4 or 5 manufacturers made over $1 billion in revenues over a decade. I want you to be now this is very important, folks. Ready? They made somewhere between, now, I want to be clear. The revenues are sales. They're not profits. You can't go spend your revenues. Revenues and sales are the same thing. These gun companies that sold AR-15 style firearms earned over a decade. That's 10 years. That's not like last week, over a decade, 10 years. They had revenues and sales of some number over $1 billion, somewhere between $1 billion and $1.7 billion as best I can glean from what I'm reading in the reporting. Here's the kicker. I want you to put this in context. First of all, it's not profit. Those are revenues. To earn those revenues, those gun companies had to spend a lot of money. They had to spend money on making the guns. They had to spend money on getting the parts. They had to spend money on making the parts. They had to spend money on getting the raw materials. They had to have employees. They had to have rents. They had to build plants. They had to pay their on and on and on. There's all these costs that go into making these revenues. The Democrats, I should say that the New York Times did not talk about profits. They were talking about revenues. But of course, why is that? Because the revenue number is dramatically going to be much bigger than the profit number. So they wanted to make it look like these gun companies were profiting and making all this money off these types of firearms, when the reality is this is not a huge number. And I want to put this into some context. The movie Top Gun 2, that came out a few months ago, I saw it. I loved it. I thought it was great. I wish they'd make more movies like that out of woke Hollywood. I would love to see that. Okay? But set that aside. The movie Top Gun 2 that came out a few months ago earned so far box office numbers of what? $1.3 billion. So think about that for a second. In just the last several months, a single movie, Top Gun 2, has generated revenues of $1.3 billion. And in contrast, these gun companies, these major gun companies in America, it took them a decade, 10 years, not a few months, years, 10 years, to earn revenues of somewhere between $1 billion and looks like $1.7 billion. Now let's put this into some other context. We literally have people walking around the United States, billionaires who are worth $1 billion. We have billionaires that are worth tens of billions of dollars. We even have billionaires in the United States that are worth hundreds of billions of dollars. So what we're really talking about here when we talk about $1 billion or $1.7 billion or whatever it is that is the case in terms of these revenues of these gun companies off AR-15 sales, what we're really talking about here, in my opinion, are the equivalent of 3 Russian oligarch yachts. Because each of those yachts those Russian oligarchs used to buy, they would sell for $400, $500, $600 million. So you buy 3 Russian oligarch yachts, you've got all the revenues for these gun companies associated with AR-15 sales over the last 10 years. These are not big numbers. Not big numbers at all. And when you compare them to the size of other industries like the tobacco industry, the alcohol industry, the gun industry is tremendously dwarfed. And last but not least, I want to just mention about this the following. Keep in mind that it's absurd to suggest that these gun companies are liable for anything. I'll tell you why. When you regulate products, what you're trying to do is to make sure 2 things happen as regulators of people that sell products to retail customers. Number 1 is that whatever that product that's sold to the customer is what you say it is. If you say this is a brown box of Raisinets and you sell it, the government regulators want to make sure that you're selling a brown box of Raisinets. You're not misleading them. You're not deceptive. You're not threatening. You're not lying to them. Right? That's the idea. You're not committing fraud or deception. What you say you're selling, you're selling. Okay? The issue with the anti-gunners is that and the regulators when it comes to guns is that the guns that they're complaining about work perfectly fine. They work exactly the way they're supposed to work. You pull the trigger, it fires a bullet. So the regulators of the firearm industry find that when you look at the guns, they actually act as advertised. They say there's a 30-round mag, there's a 30-round mag. They say it fires 30 rounds, it fires 30 rounds. It doesn't blow up in your hands. It doesn't shoot backwards. It doesn't do anything like that. When you drop it, it usually works, right? All these things. The problem is the anti-gunners and the regulators, when they look at firearms, it's not that they're upset that the firearms don't work, like you would be, let's say, with a car that was a lemon, meaning a lemon car that didn't work, right? I'm selling you a car, but it turns out it doesn't work. It has to be repaired all the time. That's what regulators usually go after. But the firearms, generally, they all work exactly as intended. You pull the trigger, they fire it. The problem is the regulators and the anti-gunners don't want the guns to work at all. And that's why when people say, well, the gun industry is not regulated, first of all, it's a total lie. It's incredibly regulated. We're going to talk about those in details in later videos. And most importantly, of course, the first sale that every single gun in America, every new gun in America, sold by these gun companies, every single one, 100% of them, before they go out into the world to deal with law-abiding people, civilians, whatever it is, before they go out the door, every one of these civilian firearms has to go to a retailer and goes out to the outside world after a NICS check, an FBI background check has occurred. You can't tell me, you can't tell me there's any other product or very few products like this where there's some sort of check before it goes out the door. Maybe pharmaceutical medicines that are prescription-based, but bottom line is every firearm that goes out to the civilian world, there's a NICS check first at the retail establishment to make sure the person taking possession of the firearm is indeed a law-abiding citizen and not a prohibited person. All this stuff, of course, will be lost in the New York Times that continues to talk about propaganda of assault rifles and assault weapons. But the bottom line is, this is not a big industry. They're trying to destroy the industry on purpose. They're trying to do it not because the industry has done anything wrong. They're just trying to do it because they need to get an end run around the Second Amendment, which the Supreme Court is now robustly protecting. And the anti-gunners and their handmaidens in the media are very angry. So they've got this new angle. And today's testimony in front of the House by these gun companies was part of the plan to go after the gun industry and intimidate them and shut them down any way they can if they had their druthers on the anti-gun side. Okay, I hope you learned something here today at the Four Boxes Diner. We'll see you again soon. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. Thanks again for joining us at the Four Boxes Diner.
Orders up. Table 2A.